So Into the West is the real campaign for the northwest corner of the island of Ireland. We cover counties Derry, Donegal, Tyrone and Fermanagh. There are 5 counties on the island which don't have any rail at all, and 3 of those are in our patch. They're Tyrone, Donegal and Fermanagh. And we campaign to see both improvements to the small bit of existing rail, which is in our patch, which is the railway line which runs from Derry City round to Belfast, but also to have rail expanded and restored across those counties I mentioned and other places as well.
Okay, we could talk for hours about the history of the rail network on the island of Ireland, but we won't do that today. Okay, Steve, would I be right in saying that only in the last couple of weeks there are strong indications that decisions to reopen rail in West Ulster will be made over the next couple or few months?
It's certainly looking like the information to make those decisions will be available to the ministers. There are a number of real feasibility studies which have been ongoing in the north and we're led to believe are now finished and are now with the Minister for Infrastructure north of the border, who's Liz Kimmins. Some of those were funded by London and some have been funded locally. So the feasibility studies, and there's quite a few of them, the big ones which come out of the All Island Rail Review are restoring rail to Armagh, so extending it from Portadown to Armagh, restoring rail between Derry and Portadown, which would then create a link for the northwest all the way down to Dublin through Portadown, electrification of the existing railway line between Belfast and Dublin, and then reopening the railway line between Antrim and Lisburn, what's known as the Knockmore line. But what that would do is it would bring rail bring rail to Belfast International Airport, or at the very least bring it within about a mile of the airport. So that's effectively about bringing rail to Northern Ireland's largest airport. So those are the feasibility studies which are being funded by London. There are some other smaller feasibility studies as well which are funded locally into the possibility of some new stations to the east of Derry, because when you leave Derry, the train doesn't stop for 21 miles, and that's the largest gap in the railway network anywhere in Northern Ireland and the second largest on the island. So we're hopeful that will also recommend some new stations east of Derry, because our station is very isolated. So the Minister in the north, and also because a lot of those projects are cross-border, like the Derry Portadown is about connecting Donegal and the northwest down to Dublin, and Belfast Dublin electrification is obviously about the Enterprise railway line which runs along the east coast. So the Minister in the north will have the results of those feasibility studies and hopefully enough information to decide which and when and how to take them forward. And presumably she will share that with her colleague in the south as well, certainly with regard to Derry Portadown and also the electrification of Belfast to Dublin. So we're told that the Minister has that information, has those studies, and that their results will be made public in September. There's not a great record of targets being hit in terms of when things are publicly stated, so I wouldn't be surprised if that falls into October, maybe even November. But it sounds like later this year they will go public on the findings of these various feasibility studies, which is, I guess, is sort of phase one of what do we do with the All Island Rail Strategies recommendations north of the border. So it's certainly exciting times for the rail north of the border and covering some parts of the south as well.
Yeah, okay. I just have one question, or one or two questions on the Republic of Ireland side. Steve, in terms of the Irish government, I think it's right to say that there's a review of the current National Development Plan going on at the moment, so that's linked in as well, I think. But am I right in saying, Steve, that in terms of campaigning by yourselves and Into the West, that the proposed line between Letterkenny and Derry City is the only request on new rail you have of the Irish government, or are there other calls you have as well?
It's certainly our biggest request of the Irish government. Letterkenny is currently the third largest town in the Republic without rail, and by 2035 it's on schedule to become the largest without rail, because the two places which are bigger than it which don't currently have rail, which are Swords and Navan, are due to get rail. Swords through Metrolink, if that ever happens, and Navan through an extension of the M3 Parkway line north from there. So by that time, by 2035, it's likely that Letterkenny will have a population of over 25,000 people, and it'll be the largest town anywhere in the Republic without rail. So it's certainly got a very strong case to have rail restored. And the distance between Derry and Letterkenny is about 21 miles. So to restore rail between those two towns, which together make up what's called the Northwest City region, the genuine cross-border region, the border doesn't exist. When you come up to Derry and Donegal, people are crossing that border multiple times a day for work, for study, for shopping, for socialising. And there's no way that those journeys can be made any other way, really, except from private car. The vast majority of those 21 miles between the two are located in the Republic. You're talking about 3 miles possibly being north of the border, depending where you put a bridge to cross the River Foyle, and the rest being in the south. So that's certainly our largest ask of the government in the Republic. We're also keen in terms of longer-term asks to see rail, once we get rail between Derry and Portadown restored, which would go all the way through Tyrone. We'd like to see rail extended between Omagh and Enniskillen, and eventually on from Enniskillen down to Sligo. And likewise to see rail, once you get it to Letterkenny, to have that spine of rail which used to run up through Donegal, going from Ballabafay to Donegal Town, Ballyshannon, Bundoran, down to Sligo, to see that restored as well. But they're very much further in the distance in terms of priority and viability as well, if we're honest. So that's why we're keen to get Letterkenny and Derry connected up first, and then after that we can start to look about where do we then take rail on in Donegal, and once we get Derry Portadown reopened, where do we take it on from Tyrone, and how can we connect it up eventually all the way down to Sligo.
Okay, Steve, do you have any idea or indications as to what, if any, lines are, as it were, a short-term priority for both Minister Jack Chambers and the Northern Ireland Executive?
It feels that Armagh to Portadown reopening has kind of elbowed its way to the front of the queue for a number of reasons. It started its own minor feasibility study funded by the council a few years ago. It's only 10 miles to restore that route, so it could be done relatively cheaply, although there are complications about how it would connect into Portadown. So there's a feeling that that's kind of nudged its way to the front of the queue, but that doesn't mean it's when push comes to shove, it would be the priority and it would get funded the first. But it's certainly at an advanced stage, and it's a relatively easy reopening. And it was moved in the All-Ireland Rail Review from a sort of a long-term to a medium-term project. Beyond that, we would hope, expect, and certainly push for Derry Portadown reopening to be a high priority. We're told that that's scored the highest of any rail reopening on the entire island. There's an estimate that it will carry 3 million passengers a year, which is pretty much the same number that currently use the Derry to Belfast line. So it would become instantly a fairly major rail line by Irish standards. And we know that Tyrone doesn't have any rail at all, and we know that if you're ever going to connect Donegal up to Dublin, which is obviously the economic and tourism driver of the entire island, if you're ever to connect Donegal up, you're going to have to come through that Derry to Portadown route. So we would hope that that will also be treated as a very high priority as well. And then thirdly, we'd expect the Antrim to Lisburn route to be a priority, because that's how you connect Belfast International Airport up to rail. That line already exists. It just isn't used for passengers. There's 3 stations which used to exist on the line between Antrim and Lisburn, were all knocked down about roughly 20 years ago. So there's a bit of work to be done. But that's not a major reopening. To get that line reopened, then the question is, how do you connect it onto Belfast International Airport? Do you have shuttle buses for a mile, or do you take a line straight up to the airport as well? But we would expect those to be the 3 priorities within all the projects moving forward. That's Antrim, Portadown, Portadown Derry, and that was Armagh, Portadown Derry, and Antrim to Lisburn.
Yeah, I don't personally know as much as yourself about the smaller geography of Northern Ireland, but as someone who's from the Republic and who knows parts of Donegal very well, and the way Donegal has been mistreated over the years by many ministers and governments in the Republic of Ireland, I think it would be beyond shocking if the Republic of Ireland government didn't commit funding over the next few weeks or months to reopen Letterkenny to Derry. Would you agree with that?
It's certainly, yeah. I mean, it's certainly merits it, given its population size. Letterkenny is the fastest growing large town in the Republic. It grew by 17% in the 6 years between 2016 and 2022. It's by far the largest population centre in Donegal, and it's the economic driver. It has a university there now, ATU, which stretches all the way down to Sligo and Galway. The case for restoring rail to Letterkenny is very strong. It's not a high-cost project. It's not a great distance between Letterkenny and Derry. Letterkenny has insane congestion. For a town of 23,000 people, it literally has worse congestion than places 2 or 3 times its size, worse than Drogheda or Dundalk. And that's because there is basically no other way to get in and out of Letterkenny, realistically, rather than driving. And, that needs to be addressed. And on top of that, if you look at the entire border, there's 500 miles of the border running from Derry all the way down to Carlingford Lough. You would think, I'm sure your listeners would think, that probably the most crossings along that border every day happen on the Belfast to Dublin corridor, because that's where most people live and that's where most of the economic activity is. But they'd be wrong. Over a third of all cross-border journeys on a daily basis for work or for study happen between Derry City and Donegal. And that's people crossing that border multiple times. Yet there's no way to do those journeys apart from by private car. So we have the need in Donegal. We have the clear demand of significant numbers of cross-border journeys being made there. And we have a real opportunity with the Apple windfall tax, with the National Development Plan, and also with the EU. Donegal is part of the one area of the Republic which is considered to be not developed by the European Union. It's considered to be in transition. That's the northern and western region. And that means there's money available also from the EU to invest in improving sustainable infrastructure in places like Donegal. Money, if it wouldn't come to the Irish state otherwise, it would go to Bulgaria or Estonia or somewhere else. So it's not like anywhere else on the island would lose out if we got EU funding for Donegal. And the opportunity to get that money that exists now probably won't be there in about 10 years or so, as the Irish economy continues to improve. So everything's pointing towards restoring rail to Letterkenny being an absolute no-brainer. We just need the politicians, both locally in Donegal, and there's certainly some support there, but we need more of it, but also down in Dublin, to realise there is an opportunity here, there's a great need here, and it's just a case of addressing historical neglect of the Northwest as well. So this is the time to finally deliver something for rail in Donegal.
Okay, Steve, to play devil's advocate, this is not something I believe, but like some people in Dublin might think, why should they care about rail in Donegal and Northern Ireland? And what would you say to that, Steve?
There's very much an argument of self-interest for anybody in Dublin, Greater Dublin, to see the infrastructure improved in the northwest of the island. We know that Dublin is overheating greatly, both in terms of property prices and spatial development and everything else. Dublin is kind of struggling, and its quality of life is reducing, its cost of living and its housing and everything is going through the roof. If you go up to the northwest of the island, you have the lowest cost corner of the entire island, where houses are relatively the cheapest, where incomes are the lowest, where need is the greatest for investment. So this isn't about charity. This isn't about Dubliners giving a handout for those lazy so-and-sos up in the northwest. This is about enabling the northwest to fulfil its potential, to get up to the standard where it can make as big a contribution towards the economy and the tax take and everything else that the rest of the island can do, but because the rest of the island has been enabled to do that. So by giving Donegal and Derry and the entire northwest better infrastructure, better connecting it in within its local environments, but also across the entire island, better connected to Dublin, to Belfast, it will be better able to perform economically. It will be better able to provide, some of the housing need, which there clearly is across the island. There's no reason why somebody who works a couple of days a week in Dublin couldn't live in Letterkenny and commute down by rail. But at the moment, that would be a terrible journey to be taken by road, and the bus, you just wouldn't do it at all. So there's a real contribution, and a bigger contribution, to be made to the fortunes of the entire island by the northwest. It just needs to be able to do that. And a key part of that is for it to have better infrastructure to help take some of that heat and pressure off of places like Dublin.
And I think the word is as regards like if more lines, rail lines get announced over the next few weeks or couple of months or few months, I think it'd be wonderful, to have the connection, the rail connections there. It'd just be fantastic. I say this to someone from Dublin who would love to jump on a train and go to Donegal and Derry and all. Just be able to because it'd be a lot faster than the car. Would it, Steve?
Yeah, the journey down to Dublin by rail from Derry should be roughly 3 hours. I mean, the best you can do that journey by car is about 3.5 hours. As soon as you hit the edge of Dublin, get into traffic, you're talking four plus hours, certain times of the day. It'll be the consistently the quickest way to get down, the most reliable time wise. That's just a nice way to travel. You can sit back, you can have a snooze on the train, read a newspaper, work on your computer, have a bite to eat, do whatever. The stuff that you can't do when you're in the stress of driving by car. The road between Derry and Dublin, the A5 north of the border, is terrible. It has the highest accident and death rates of any road on the island. It was due to be turned into dual carriageway, but that's been rejected by the courts in the north because of its impact upon the climate. So there's a greater need now to have an alternative way to get between the northwest and Dublin, because the road isn't good enough as it is, and it'll be some time before it's able to get any better. So, yeah, there's really no better way to do that journey than by rail, and there's great opportunity to bring it in now versus even what there was a couple of years ago.